The Financial Survival Network, helping you survive and thrive in the new economy. Go to CarrieLutz.com and sign up for 30 free micro trainings on financial survival.
1490 WGCH. This is Carrie Lutz. You're listening to the Financial Survival Network. With me now is a new guest who really can help you get your plans straight for 2012. Trace Mayer. He's a JD, like yours truly, author of The Great Credit Contraction, and he has a wonderful website I've been viewing for years called run2gold.com. Trace, welcome to the Financial Survival Network. Great to have you on.
Oh, great to be here, Carrie. Thanks for inviting me.
Hey, well, we wanted to get your perspective since this is the end of the year and probably going to be my last show of 2011. What do you think the new year holds for our listeners, for your viewers, and my viewers?
Well, the world is in commotion, isn't it? But, trade and people's lives are going forward. And that's kind of what I think we're going to see. We're going to see people continuing to take a little bit more active approach to their assets and to the way that their life is designed and styled. And we're going to be moving further into the information age, which is really kind of allowing people to do what they want to with their lives as long as they've positioned themselves correctly.
Right. And so you see technology then as somewhat of a liberating force. Obviously, the way the government uses it, it can be very destructive and limiting, but you think that the trend with technology is to increase people's freedom and allow them more fulfilling lives then, right?
Well, that's the role that technology has always played through humanity. It started with humans. We would go out and we would fish and we'd catch a fish a day, but we had to save up fish so that we could create nets. And with the technology of nets, then we're able to catch 10 fish in a day, and that freed up our time and our attention to be able to be dedicated towards other tasks. And so this division of labor that humanity's gone through over the millennia, now we're at this kind of, financial markets are cyclical, but our fundamental human progress is cumulative. And so we're just entering this glorious information age that is going to, this transition into it's going to happen only in 40 years maybe, whereas it took humanity 500 years to transition from the agricultural age into the industrial age. And with the industrial age, we saw a tremendous increase in freedom and in liberty and in free time because of this excess productivity and efficiency that the technologies allowed for. And so I think that if people have positioned themselves correctly, then they will be able to reap some of the benefits of that. On the other hand, those people who haven't properly diversified their jurisdictional risk, for example, might find that somebody else is designing their lifestyle for them, most likely a government of some type. And that'll be unfortunate for those people.
Well, it's interesting that you make the point that there are different cycles in humanity, I guess, and the cycle of progress of technology isn't necessarily aligned with the financial cycles. And I guess when you have this kind of disconnect, and you have, I think you could argue there's a new financial order that's going to assert itself in the coming years ahead, probably sooner rather than later, because the fiat mode of governmental direction and definition of money and control, monopoly over money, looks like it's starting to break up, and gold and silver really are the major beneficiaries of that trend, aren't they?
Aren't they? Run2gold.com. It's not like I didn't see this coming. But yeah, I mean, what we've used as currency has changed immensely. 500 years ago when the industrial age started, we were having silver or gold. It was an actual physical commodity in your hand. You traded it for a loaf of bread. Now we use these little colored coupons that are fiat currency if we even have a physical version of them. A lot of them are just digital bits and bytes in some database somewhere. And so the way that money and currency have changed over these hundreds of years, and the way that we've allowed for the great credit expansion through debt instruments and sovereign debt and collateralized debt obligations and auction rate securities and mortgage-backed securities and commercial mortgage-backed securities and derivatives, the massive mountains of derivatives that we have. All of this has kind of taken us further and further away from what is real and what's in our hand and what and the true wealth that exists. And so we live in what I like to call this derivative illusion. We don't really know, nor can we even really value things correctly because of the distortions that government-issued money has created in the markets with things like yen and euros and Federal Reserve notes. And I think that the advances in technology are going to continue to have an impact on that market, that currency market. Just like we, records and MP3s and VHS and DVDs have been completely transformed by the internet and BitTorrents and blogs and newspapers. And so this creative destruction is going to further humanity's search for freedom and liberty and excess productivity. And I think it's a very exciting time to be in, but it's also a very volatile time because we can't necessarily see 5 years ahead. 5 years ago, Facebook was nothing, and now it's about $100 billion company.
And Twitter as well. Don't forget Twitter.
Yeah, and you've got Twitter and Google and Apple. These things are, the rate of change is happening faster and faster, and that's an exciting thing.
Yeah.
If you're willing to adapt to it, like a creative entrepreneur would.
Yeah. If you're not a union member, it's a great thing. If you're a member of a union and you think that they're going to protect you and the whole thing that you're going to be taken care of and your pension and you're a government employee, these are kind of scary times because it looks to me like the government, all the programs that we have are from a whole different era. They're obsolete. They're doing a lot more harm than any good they could possibly achieve. And we're going to see this massive collapse, and we're going to see in the coming years, and I think 2012 is really going to be a crucial fork in the road of governmental expectations, where you do have half the population expecting the government to take care of them, and the other half trying to figure out how to avoid having the government steal all their wealth, and eventually it's going to become untenable and it's going to stop. And people, I don't think, are prepared for that, and they don't really get that it's coming. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you're hitting the nail on the head, and it's not just the union worker, but it's also the elites that might own these legacy enterprises. Anybody want to buy a Tower Records? or how about a newspaper? Yep. And yet those used to be extremely valuable assets. This change in wealth and who has the wealth, it's affecting, the elite and the union worker and the peasant in China or Africa.
Yeah, and there's no way to turn back time either. Once the genie is out of the bottle, it's out, and you can't put them back in.
Yeah, I mean, the elite, they didn't like the Gutenberg press, but it doesn't matter, and the elite, they don't really like the internet because they can't control the message. Bill Clinton said, we need to go back to having 3 channels on TV. The genie's not going back in the bottle, and it's really not going back in the bottle when you have a 40% unemployment rate for people under 30 in Spain.
Yeah.
And these institutions are failing the rising generations. And people going to school, getting a lot of student debt, and then not having a job. Well, the established order of things is not securing them a future, and so they're looking for alternatives, and they're going to be looking for alternative ideas politically. And so this financial crisis, it's going to go from economic to financial to political to geopolitical crises, and hopefully, we don't have some type of a war. I was speaking a couple years ago in Arizona, and I said war was on the horizon because that's one of the ways to reduce the unemployment rate. And now that we have people, occupying Wall Street and things like that, I don't know if they understand how the elite view them, and now that they're disrupting and causing trouble. Well, in other previous credit contractions, what the elite would do is they would send them off to some foxhole in Europe, and they would die, and that would reduce the unemployment rate, and they wouldn't be causing trouble at home. And so hopefully we don't have a war on the horizon, but given the lunacy that comes out of some of our capitals throughout the world, I wouldn't be surprised if that's what's simmering over there in the Middle East right now.
Yeah, well, part of the problem with the whole war mentality, the welfare warfare state, is that history is so distorted. It teaches that World War II ended the Great Depression. And the reality is that the Great Depression ended after World War II, when a whole bunch of the things that really stopped economic expansion, froze it dead in its tracks, were repealed, those New Deal policies. And I'm afraid it's probably not going to happen here either until those policies are swept away. But let's go back to education, because we both have advanced degrees, both been to law school. Somebody comes to you now and they say they're going to college and they're really thinking about going to law school. What would you tell them?
Well, I'd ask them to kind of think about why they would want to go there and how they think they're going to finance it. I was fortunate. I was offered full tuition and scholarship, and I had been flown down to interview in San Diego, and I was like, I can spend 3 years in a sunny paradise while somebody else is paying for my school. But the average attorney graduates with $106,000 of debt. And a lot of people that I met in law school, they went in with, some type of ideal that they wanted to carry out. Maybe they wanted to work for some Save the Owl or some other injustice. You know how a lot of us are, and then they get this brutal reality of they've got $106,000 of student loan debt, and they can work as a public defender for $25,000 a year or something. And so I think that higher education and the whole system, this whole educational industrial complex that's out there, I don't know if it's necessarily preparing people with the skills and the abilities that are being demanded by the market. And, that's not to say that, like, going and learning a profession, it wouldn't be very rewarding personally in some way. And, you can derive value other ways than monetarily. But, I'm an entrepreneur first. And so I have a little bit more of a luxury in how I can spend some of my free time. And so for me, I like the intellectual pursuit. I liked law school from that aspect, but I never went there intending to practice law, and I don't practice now.
Right.
Because I have other things to do. And so, people have to look and try to figure out what their own motivations are, what's going to provide value for them. But the last thing I would want somebody to do is not having done that and then going and digging themselves a gigantic hole of $106,000 that they're going to be carrying around for the rest of their life because it can't be discharged in bankruptcy. Because at the end of the day, they're just going to be a slave.
Yeah,
they're going to be a debt slave. And that's not a way to live your life. At least not a way for me to live my life. Some people might be happy being a slave, but not me.
Yeah, well, it's a slave with all of the burdens of servitude and none of the benefits. At least when people were enslaved by another, they were going to be fed and probably taken care of because they were an investment, and you didn't want to destroy your investment. Not that I'm advocating a return to those days. I just think the definition of slavery has evolved, and we're now these debt slaves. And it's funny, I was listening to you say you're an entrepreneur first, you went to law school to help you in that pursuit, and I'm like an echo chamber, because I always said exactly the same thing. The times in my career that I was the most unhappy was when I was actually practicing law, and I always said if I was any good at law, I wouldn't still be practicing. And finally, I'm doing what I love to do. And, this is a failing of our educational system, because it's based on that Prussian model of, regimentation and discipline and, crack the whip. And the fact is, there's nothing in any school I've ever seen that teaches young minds, that guides them to find their love, to find their passion, and to pursue it against all obstacles. And that's why I would say if somebody really loves the law, if they were born to practice, they've been reading law books since they were toilet trained, and there are those people out there, right? Then, hey, go do law school. You need to be a lawyer. But if you think that it's going to just lead you to higher income, or, you'll get to be Perry Mason or whatever the nonsense is, then you really need to think twice. And that's the problem with the whole system, is it doesn't really show people that, hey, if you have something you want to do and you want to develop an expertise, it will support you if you love it. And, I've only learned that, in the last however many years, but it's so important to identify that, to identify the passion, because if you've got a passion, and I've seen this, in people who I know and people who I've worked with, where they, especially in our area, Trace, I find this, like, so many people are passionate about what they're doing. They wouldn't be doing anything else in the world. This is everything to them, whether it's analyzing gold stocks or economic analysis, following the crash, whatever it is. We've got like a whole bunch of passionate, driven people who found their calling, and that to me is what it's all about. And obviously you've done the same, because you're doing what you're doing now, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo that. We're at a new year. Figure out how you want to design your life, because life is too short, and time is the fire in which we burn. And don't spend it like working 14 hours a day reading contracts or something. And that's not to say that I haven't used my law degree, and I haven't used it in a way that I'm very passionate about. For example, I had a friend who ran a very high-profile, high-trafficked website. Millions of people a month went to it in the mortgage industry, and he highlighted mortgage frauds. And one of these people that had perpetrated a massive fraud sued him, and he didn't really have the money to defend himself. So me and a couple of my friends who were also attorneys, we took him on pro bono, and we took his case to the New Hampshire Supreme Court, and we won. And we protected his freedom of speech. And I'm very passionate about the freedom of speech, and I'm very passionate about our ability to argue with ideas. And so it was, very gratifying that I was able to do that. But I think it gets back to that. People, you've got to find what your passion is. Whether I'm also a pilot. If I were to choose a job, it would probably be that. I mean, I create jobs. I don't really want one.
Sure.
But if I were to have one, that's what it would probably be, because I just absolutely love it. And so people, they got to find their passion, and it really doesn't matter what age you're at. I suppose the worst thing to do would be to end up like 65 or 70 and retiring, having worked an entire life in something that you're not passionate about. Yeah. And then trying to figure out what you were supposed to have done with your life. And so, for me, life is just too short. Like, so I just I like to do epic things, and I like to, I want to make my dent on the universe, and I don't really take no for an answer, and I like to think that I'm helping a lot of people in the process.
Yeah, it's so important, and it really makes a difference in the quality of your life. And Trace, just to tell us if somebody's looking to figure out how to put together a plan in the current financial environment, where do they find you?
Runtogold.com is my blog where I write, and there's plenty of stuff to read on there. I do answer questions if people send me email questions, and sometimes those turn into articles. And also I have a website about privacy, and that website's called howtovanish.com, and I think that's going to become increasingly important for people who want to design their lifestyle, because we're moving into this era where it is much more of a form of public slavery instead of private slavery, and that's unfortunate.
Yep. Totally agree with you on that one. And if anyone wants to find out more about Trace, I've got a link to his site on kerrylutz.com/resources. And if you want to listen to any more of our segments, our shows, just go to kerrylutz.com. And Trace, thanks for being with us. Wish you the best for the coming year. I think we've put out some valuable information that will hopefully help some people start getting headed in the right direction.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. It is kind of big picture, general stuff, but that's important.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you soon, Trace.